Hello, my name is Heather Scruggins, and this is my research presentation for my Individuals with Autism class. And my research is over the effects of applied behavior analysis on the functional skill development of students with ASD. I would like to make a small disclaimer. I am sitting on my bed. I do apologize for that. I am going to have back surgery in a couple of days, and this is the only place that I can sit up. So I appreciate your understanding and hope that it doesn't distract you. so I have been a special education teacher for 10 years. This was the first year that we did not have an autism classroom, and we went mainstream with our autism kids, and we put them into inclusive classroom settings. And I teach an integrated literacy class with a para. And the thing that I had found, and I figured the best way to do this research project was to find a real world problem, and it is a real world problem. My students were all academically functioning on level. The work was not hard, explaining it, making sure they understood exactly what I was wanting. That presented a bit of a challenge, but we figured that out. They were fine. They matched up with their peers very well, some exceeding their peers in academic areas. Where we tended to run into problems was in our functional skills in the classroom. It was in our how we responded to things, our mannerisms in classroom, the things we did, just little things that um, that we that they would do, I guess, kind of as a self-stimulating activity. It wasn't big things. We know there wasn't, hand flapping and spinning and things like that you normally see. These were all different, and they kind of varied depending upon the kid. But they were proving to be distracting. They were causing that ultimate goal of full inclusion to kind of not be there. And we don't want them sitting on the outside of the inside. We want them to be a part of that. So my thought is, okay, what is the best way to handle this to get these functional skills in place so that they really are fully inclusive in this setting? So that was the basis of my research. I looked over the different strategies and read through the textbook, and applied behavior analysis is something I'm very familiar with, and it's always been more toward um, not so much mannerisms and functional behaviors as it was towards just actual behaviors. So, but I looked at it in the perspective, I really like applied behavior analysis. It is, it's highly structured, it demands consistency, and it's individualized. And those are all things that children with autism need in order to be successful. The proper definition of applied behavior analysis is the utilization of the basic principles of learning and motivation to address socially important problems. So basically what they're saying is we're going to teach you how to handle these social and functional situations. And I thought this is exactly what we need. So I set out to do some research on it, and I came across a lot of articles and a lot of support for applied behavior analysis. It is a very highly effective research tool when compared to other approaches like pivotal response training. There were studies done that showed that applied behavior analysis gave better results than pivotal response training did. They were both effective, but applied behavior analysis, there was a greater amount of effectiveness as far as it was to address behaviors. The big difference here that I found in that research is applied behavior analysis, like I said, it is individualized. It looks at a specific problem and teaches an alternative to that. So, for instance, if you have a child that incessantly taps their pencil, and this is, we have one like this, they just tap it, it's just what they do, and a lot of kids do that. But most kids, when you tell them, hey, can you stop that because it's bothering the people around you, they'll stop. this was not the case. And what this was is this tapping was serving as a function for that student whenever it helps them focus is what it is, whereas with other kids it didn't. So with applied behavior analysis, we looked at that behavior and said, okay, what alternatives can we give him so that he still gets this need met, but he's able to function within the classroom because we're not disrupting the others around us. And that's what applied behavior analysis does. Pivotal response training is more of I feel like it's more of a broader aspect to that. It's self-motivation and how to handle frustration, and it's like these overarching concepts. Like, this is what we're doing. We're tapping because this helps us focus, and when we don't tap, we become frustrated. But we're fixing this specific behavior as to where pivotal response training is looking at it as a whole. Anytime you get frustrated, this is what you do. This is what I like about applied behavior analysis opposed to pivotal response training, is that the reasons I get frustrated here are not going to necessarily be the same reasons I get frustrated over here. The environment plays a big part in this, and it is looking at the environment around you. What is triggering this behavior? What is the function of this behavior? What is the student getting from it? And, in this class, it might be, it's harder, so I tap my pencil and it helps to calm me down. But in this other class, I don't get frustrated at the work because the work is easy. I get frustrated at the noise, and so it's two different triggers of frustration, where in pivotal response, you just teach them one coping skill for frustration. And in applied behavior analysis, we look at each individual piece of that. So research shows that is one of the reasons why applied behavior analysis is so much more effective, is because it is targeting those specific things. There was an article in a research journal that I found that talked about how ABA improved relationships between students with ASD and their siblings. And I know you're thinking, well, their siblings, this is school. But if you think about your relationship with your siblings and your relationship with your peers are not that different. You spend upwards to 8 hours a day with your peers at school. You spend 8 waking hours at home with your siblings, and then the rest of the time you're sleeping. So, this was a research thing that was done in 2011, and it showed that when applied behavior analysis was used at home, there was a significant improvement in communication and a decrease in frustration between siblings. And that relationship can be mirrored in our schools. So I thought that was very important to look at, because you want to improve social relationships for students who have ASD, and social skills are part of that functionality. When you have poor social skills, you do not function as well as others who have higher set skills. One of the big things that I did keep seeing over and over and over again in my research was the importance of early intervention. Okay, the earlier the better, because I do understand this and I see this firsthand when one of the big difficulties that students with ASD face is they don't really see anything from another perspective. It's just theirs, and when they are hard and fast on something, that's what it is, and it doesn't matter what you tell them. That's not going to change how they see that. So the earlier the intervention occurs, the greater effect it will have. And there was a study done by a group of doctors, and the ultimate goal of this study was that they wanted to see the effects of intervention for behavior for children who had ASD. They weren't biased or, oh, try this method. My method's great. Oh, try my method. They were like, we want research with each method just to show, what can be done for students with autism, because once upon a time, this just didn't exist. It wasn't an option. You had this diagnosis, it meant this. But we've learned over time that that is not the case, that students with ASD are so individual and not one is like the other. And so you really have to approach them that way when you're talking about behavior modification and learning styles and what you do with them in the classroom. So this was great. And what I did love about this, because it did bode well for what I was looking into, was that um, when they talked to the doctors about each of these different things, a lot of them felt like, of all the strategies that were shown to them in the research, that one, early intervention is very important, but that two, applied behavior analysis seemed to be the most effective. Now, they did not say this is the one I like, because as I learned in my research, applied behavior analysis can have a bit of a bad reputation to it, but it was the most effective. And so I really thought that was great. But when I kept doing my research, I wanted to see how you implement that and everything. And I took an entire class over it at Arkansas State University. And so I'm pretty well versed in it now, but that is not the case for everybody. One research I came upon, it was an international study done. Actually, it was a researcher interviewed 165 Irish teachers, and they were asked about applied behavior analysis, what they thought about that, and all of them agreed that they thought it was an effective program, but they didn't really know very much about it. They knew how to do it, but that was it. They didn't really know why they were doing it. They didn't really have a common language developed for it. They each kind of just took it and ran with it and did their own thing with it. Well, the research shows that for applied behavior analysis to be truly effective, it needs to be consistent among everybody who uses it. So we're talking about educators, administrators, related service providers, family. We want that same language. We want that same expectation of behavior with our students. And so applied behavior analysis is one that can be taught to everybody, but it's one that if you don't understand it, looking at it from the outside in, it's not always easy. Another article very similar to that talked about how, professional development is important for educators, but administrators need to know this too. And I see this firsthand. I love my administrators. I really do. But I think there are times when all they see is the outside and they don't see what is going on behind the scenes that got us to this point. When you do something like applied behavior analysis, it does not work right off the bat. It takes time to develop and consistency with it. And when you've worked really, really hard on this child that's using this replacement behavior, and then this behavior happens elsewhere and someone comes in and they don't do what you've worked on doing, it's a setback for those children. So I feel like and agree with the research that everyone should be versed in this. Everyone that is going to be involved in this student's life has an investment, whether it's educational or personal. They should understand these concepts. So training is a huge, huge thing for this in order to be successful. A lot of the myths that surrounded ABA, which kind of gave it its, do I really want to do this kind of thing? And it was that, one, it's only for students with ASD. This is totally not true. I used it when I taught an alternative learning classroom, and I didn't have a single student with ASD in that classroom because they had all behaviors learned. Okay, you learned when you were a baby that if you cried, your mom gave you something or changed your diaper, and you got what you wanted, so you continued to cry. And as you got older, you learned that if you said milk, mom would give you milk. And then as we get older, we learn that if we do these things, we get the result we want. Okay, it's no different for students with autism. They learn how to get what they want. I read this passage in one of these articles or in our textbook that we have, and it was so funny, and it might have been in a group post. I don't remember where I read it. I read a lot of stuff, but it talked about this teacher who had this little girl that she would come up and bite her on the leg. Like all the time, walked up, bit her on the leg. And they had started using pecks or something like that with her. And they figured out, after a while, it took a while, that when she bit her on the leg, she was trying to tell her she was hungry. And so she just bit her on the leg. Okay, that is a functional behavior that I'm talking about. Okay, that's what she knew to do. If I bite you, I'm hungry, give me something to eat. Now, what it would have been bad is if they'd realized that and they'd given her something without reinforcing an appropriate behavior. Say, okay, if you're hungry, and show her hungry, show her the word, show her a picture of food, then you have to point to this. Show me this, and that will tell me you're hungry. And you've taught them an appropriate behavior. Now, I work with really high functioning students with autism, but I have kind of a similar issue. I have a student who won't talk to you first. You have to talk to them first. So if they are having trouble with something, I would have absolutely no idea because that student will never tell me. I have to go ask them. And so we worked really hard on, when you don't understand, raise your hand. And then I will come and ask you, is there something you don't understand? And then they can respond to me. And so it really worked. It was great. It took us about a month to kind of get that, because I would really watch them closely. The pair would really watch them closely, but we're in a classroom of 27 kids. And so that can be difficult at times. But we did. And then one day the student walked up to my desk and asked me a question. And I was like, I have to call your mother, because they had learned and they had, looked at their peers and watched what their peers were doing. And it's just like, oh, okay, I get it. I don't have to do things this way. I can do things this way and get the same result. And that is what we're looking for. We are looking to replace that, inappropriate behavior, or not really inappropriate, because it's not inappropriate. It's, there's such a technical word for that right now that I can't think of. I don't know, the behavior that we don't like so much, and replace it with one that we do like. So, and I apologize, I can't think of the word right now. So I kind of thought that was great that, I come across this article, talked about all these myths, and I'm like, this is not just for students with autism. I use it on my 9-year-old right now, and it's, it's working. We've replaced some choice words we learned on the school bus with better ones. So, and it's the same thing. You take away the undesirable and you replace it with a more desirable behavior. I was trying to see. Oh, one of the other things that I did come across, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, was the importance of common language. I see this a lot in the special education field in general. I work for, it's not a really large school district. It's larger than some. But we work really close to a very large school district. And depending on what school something came from, they all look different. The way they word things is different. The way they do things is different. There's no commonality except for 3. The IEP is about as common as we get on the way we do things. And that's not good. I really feel like that is one thing special education is lacking in our state, is there is not a common, language, or a common set of guidelines, or a common, expectation to things. There are things you have to have. There are districts that go above and beyond. There are ones that do the bare minimum. There are ones that have an entire office dedicated to special education and law and everything like that. And then there's some that have one person who's a teacher and their LEA. And there's nothing wrong with that, and I'm not putting anything like that down. My point is that when you get things on other students who have transferred in, there should be a commonality in the language that you're reading. And there's not. The forms don't even look the same. It is a headache. So imagine the frustration that would occur if you're in a building and you're trying to do applied behavior analysis with a student and you call it, one thing, and you call it a replacement behavior, this teacher calls it an acceptable behavior, and that teacher over there calls it a good behavior. That's not common language. So when you tell a student, I'm looking for acceptable behavior, well, Joe Bob down the hallway is looking for good behavior. Miss Cindy Lou is looking for acceptable behavior. There's not a commonality there. So there needs to be, because when this child travels, they're not with you. I teach sixth graders, and they go. I see them an 80-minute block of time a day, and I don't see them the rest of the day. I send them off into the wild that is middle school. And it is my job to make sure anybody else that interacts with them uses the same language with them that I do. And we're all different, so we're not going to naturally. That's when collaboration is huge. Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. If there's anything that I can teach a new teacher coming in, it is learn to collaborate. Do not feel like you have to do it all on your own. Do not feel like you're trying to prove yourself to anybody. Find your group, get with the people, collaborate. Work as a team, because that is how you are successful, and that is how you are successful with anything. So common language is such an important thing, because our ultimate goal is to generalize this replacement behavior across all settings. We want that child to not tap incessantly with his pencil in computer lab, in math, in science, in social studies, in literacy, in the cafeteria. We want them to generalize, okay, if this bothers everybody in literacy, it probably bothers everybody in math. But they don't do that naturally. It's okay, I don't do it when I'm in Miss Scroggins' class, but when I get over here to Miss So-and-so's class, I'm going to do it, because I'm not in Miss Scroggins' class anymore, even though I sit with the same group of kids. They don't generalize it. That is the goal, is to generalize this replacement behavior across all areas. And that can only be done when you are collaborating with anyone with an investment in that student. You are using common language, and you are using language that students can understand. Okay, I know some big words. One of my favorite words is impulsivity. I don't know why, because honestly I didn't know that was a word until I started teaching special education, or until my son was diagnosed with ADHD and I was told he has impulse control problems. But impulsivity is like my favorite word, and I will say it in a meeting, and I got a parent that goes, what? And I'll say, oh, they do things without thinking about it first. Okay, that's the definition of impulsive. But that's what you want. You want the common language. You want language they understand. You want language parents can understand. Because guess what? You want this done at home. If it's done at home and it's done at school, there's going to be so much more effectiveness in it. And it can't always be done at home. And we know that sometimes we are the only ones fighting for these kiddos. And I get it. But the more we can collaborate, the more we can get everything on the same page, the more successful that student will be. I kind of rambled on about this now for a little bit, but I think kind of the key points on this is that the research shows that applied behavior analysis is an effective strategy to use with students with ASD. It tends to talk more about behavior and social aspects of it, but honestly, functional skills is a combination of behavior and social skills put together. Appropriate behavior, appropriate social skills equals a student who can function in a classroom. So that's what we're looking at, is the overall functionality. And the ABA system has proven effective because it is highly structured, something that students with ASD desperately need. It is clearly communicated. And that is something else they need. You cannot be vague. Oh, that's, just act appropriately. No, you have to say, instead of tapping your pencil, you're going to tap your foot. Okay? Because the foot's on the floor, we have carpeted area. But see, that's where you run into problems. Does every room have a carpeted area? And in this case, it did. So it kind of worked. But it took the distraction away. Sometimes our foot gets a little too much and we have to slow it down. But you get my point. And it is individualized. Students with ASD are so unique. I have 4 in one classroom and not a single one of them is the same. I could not do for one what I do for the other. There's one that you have to be firm and stern and almost bordering sounding mean for him to understand that this isn't an option. He has to do this. And then you have one who you have to be very soft spoken with, because anything loud and that anything loud is perceived as anger. Okay? Imagine having those 2 in the same class. I have to sit them very far away from each other. But my point is that it is individualized. What works for one doesn't work for the other. And that is the beauty of applied behavior analysis. You watched them. You did you did a behavior assessment on them. You looked for their triggers. You looked for what the purpose was behind that behavior, and then you set out to find one that would replace it. You've talked to the parents, you talked to the other teachers, you looked for triggers, and you designed this replacement behavior that is specific only to that student. Now you can say, wow, this worked great for the student. Maybe this will help Susie to stop. I can't even think of something else they do. To stop spinning in circles. I don't really know. You're not going to do it the same way, but you're going to use the same principles behind it because you will make it individual to Susie. Professional development is the key to that. Learning about these strategies. I'm leery to say what I'm about to say. I'm not knocking the professional development for curriculum and stuff like that. You have to do that. Curriculum is changing. The state mandates change constantly, and you have to keep up with those. But we need to look at, when we look at these strategies for behavior management and stuff, let me tell you, behaviors occur in regular classrooms too. Okay, it's not isolated to the special education classrooms. In fact, there are some situations where it's worse in other classrooms. Teaching your teachers and your administrators these strategies that everyone knows, it doesn't matter who the student is, it doesn't matter what the behavior is, you have this wheelhouse to pull from. Okay, we're going to look at the behavior, we're going to figure out why they're doing it, and we're going to figure out something to replace it with. You can do that for any kid, but you have to teach them how to do that. You've got to teach your teachers how to do that. You've got to teach your administrators how to do that. And so professional development is huge. It is a huge thing that needs to be done. There is I can't really tell if it's a book or if it's an ebook, but it is called, it's from a magazine. That's what it is. Sorry. But it is, Applied Behavior Analysis in Special Education, Misconceptions and Guidelines for Use, and it came from Teaching Exceptional Children. It is a journal, and it was amazing. It outlined it gave the definition of what you were doing. It gave an outline of how to do it, the evaluation you do, and how you implement that, and how you look to make it individualized. And it was a great resource to have because it showed that any area of need could be addressed in this. And it was written in a way that educators could better understand it. I feel like the result of my research proves that applied behavior analysis is highly effective with students with ASD in regards to helping them build appropriate functional skills in the general education classroom. We are moving more and more toward fully inclusive classrooms, which is great, but we have to make sure that our students are not only academically ready, but they are functionally ready to return to such a large environment. And sometimes it's those small group settings that have kind of created these, you could call them like bad habits. We could do this when there was just 5 of us, and it really wasn't a big deal because it wasn't bothering anybody because nobody paid attention that I was doing it anyways, to I'm in a room with 28 kids and this is bothering them, or this is not something that they understand and vice versa. And you can do it the opposite way. You can teach, understanding and empathy and tolerance to your other students too. But the things I'm talking about are more, they are really hindering their functioning in the classroom. And that's kind of what we want to focus on. But we want to help develop those appropriate behaviors, and the ABA really does do that. I kind of don't really know where to go from there. I think that's kind of my key point, is that ABA is very effective in helping build functional skills in students with ASD, ensuring professional development for teachers and related service providers and administrators and parents is crucial to the success. Early intervention is huge. Common language, consistency, and, clearly communicated goals for these kids is going to make this the most effective program. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I hope that you have found this to be helpful for you. All of the sources and articles that I looked up and referenced in this are found at the bottom of my research paper that is attached along with this video. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you.